Now let's take an example of flight reservation system. Now this is the home page of flight reservation system, and suppose in your application you need to find the number of buttons which are disabled. So I want the count of the number of buttons which are disabled. Now this could be a part of testing, because say for example there's a requirement wherein the developer has created an application wherein 3 buttons are enabled. For example, we are entering the date of flight, fly from and fly to. The rest all the buttons are disabled. Okay, as you can see, when I click on text boxes, all the buttons are disabled. Now as you can see, the flights button is disabled, insert order button is disabled, update order button is disabled, the delete order button is disabled. But what happens is when I enter the date of flight, fly from and fly to, this button gets enabled. So this could be as part of requirement that we have to verify when we have a new order on the page. That is, the page is completely blank, we are not adding anything. That time the different buttons should be disabled. So as you can see, insert order, delete order, update order and flights button, all these buttons should be disabled. So suppose we want to verify whether the count is matching, count of the disabled button is matching with what with the expected value. Then we can use the child objects concept, since the buttons belong to the all the buttons belong to the same class, that is win button. Now the only difference here is we are searching for the buttons which are disabled and not all the buttons, because there are other buttons as well, but we are only searching for the count of the buttons which are disabled over here on the screen. So what we'll do is, same way we'll use set. First of all, we have to create a new child object. Okay, so I'll give some name, disabled button. Okay, any logical name which will help you to identify what collection of objects your child object has. And description.create, and once my child object is created, I'll put the different objects belonging to the same class. So I'll put the property value pair. So first property is my class. So using object spy, I can find the property value pair for the different buttons. So when I click on any of the button, you will see the my class value is win button. Okay, W and B in capital. The second thing which we are looking for is the button should be disabled, right? Because we want to find the count of the buttons which are disabled. So there is a property called as enabled, and the value is false. If the value is true, that means the button is enabled, whereas when the value is false, the button is disabled. So we'll need this property value pair as well in order to filter out the objects, child objects of a particular criteria, that is the disabled button. So my class value was win button dot value win button. So this is the first property value pair. The second will be enabled, and we want the objects, the buttons which are disabled. So enabled equal to false. Now my child object has the collection of all the disabled buttons. So once I have this collection, I just simply need to use the code and then find and use the dot count method to find the number of objects which are disabled in number of child objects which are present in the collection, that is the number of the disabled buttons. So what you can do is simply you can just add the object. Now when I click on this button and I add it, you'll see that flight reservation system window is there, and within that we have the flight win button. But since we are using child object concept which belongs to the descriptive programming, we do not need this in the local repository, right? We do not need this in the object repository. So I'll just delete it. I just need the flight reservation object, because I'm not using descriptive programming for flight reservation object. For the window object, I'm using child object after this. So window flight reservation dot, Then we have child objects. In that child objects, so what this code is saying is the child objects are present within the parent, which is a window called flight reservation. So this is the window called flight reservation. Within this window there are different child objects, and we are looking for the collection of disabled buttons within this window. So dot child objects, inside the bracket we need to have the name of the child object and dot count. Now I can put this in a variable iCount and just simply display this. I'll comment the rest of the code and I'll run this. So now when I run this code, okay, it is giving me the value 0. Now there is one reason behind it. One thing I have observed is we are not supposed to use false. Although the object repository, although the object spy shows the value for the property enabled is false, we are not supposed to use false directly in the code. So as you can see, when I click on the button, the enabled property will have value false. So like class name, we are not supposed to use directly in the code. As class name we use my class. Same way for enabled, we do not use directly false in the code. Instead, for false we'll use 0. For true, for enabled true we'll use 1, whereas enabled false we'll use 0 within the double bracket. So when I run this code now, it should work fine. You'll see the what QTP is saying is there are 5 objects belonging to the win button class and which are not enabled. That is, there are 5 buttons which are disabled. So let's see. As you can see, one of the button is over here, the second is the flights button, third is update order, fourth is delete order, and fifth is insert order. So as you can see, there are different these are the 5 buttons which are disabled. And in the similar fashion, we can also find the count of the buttons which are enabled. So this was about some of the common operations on child objects. We will be doing more hands-on on child objects once we begin with our hands-on session. So this session will be covering the object repository, descriptive programming, and as well as child objects. So for now, we are well versed with the concept of child objects and how we are supposed to use them in the real-time scenario. Later on in our hands-on, we'll be working on the different applications, the actual applications wherein child objects are applicable, and more of a coding part rather than concept.